Hello, my name is Dick Feeney. Today we're going to talk about highway history in the Chippewa Valley and the surrounding area. Recently I retired from the DOT after 37 years with them. And while I was there I found a lot of things in the old archives, interesting pictures, and I'd like to share those with you today. The original highways were the rivers. The traders and the voyagers traveled on the rivers by canoe, and there were no other trails, only a few Indian trails. The next thing was the steamboat to come up. They followed the river travel, and the railroad came into Wisconsin in 1870 and came into Eau Claire. But there still had to be some way of getting to the individual farms and cabins around. They went by wagons. This one taken on near Wilson Park about 1860. And the people traveled from town to town by stagecoach. And here is a remnant of one of those old stagecoach routes. This is along State Street, just above Putnam Drive, going to the west. This is the old stage road. You can still see the cut to it. Some of the people in this area still have their properties described to the center line of the old stage road. The other way for individuals to travel is by horse and buggy. And this happens to be my mother and dad while they were courting. Now the original Constitution of Wisconsin adopted in 1848 prohibited any spending of public money for highways. And so all of the responsibility for the highways was in the hands of the townships. And they levied road taxes on the farmers and the people of the township. And the way that you could work off your road taxes was to spend the spring cleanup day on the highway. And this is one of those crews, and it sort of was a big picnic, and they all got together and swapped lies from the winter before, and they didn't have an engineer to direct how they did this. They sort of just dug the muck up out of the ditch and piled it in the middle, and it sort of slid back down again. And so the roads weren't too good, but they had fun doing it. And right from the beginning there was a lot of complaints about there being poor roads in Wisconsin. About 1878 the first bicycles came to the United States, and about 1890 there was a great craze for bicycling. And the first thing that you found out when you rode a bicycle was just how bad the roads were, because you were doing the work. You were doing the pedaling, and you found out when it was slippery and you slipped and fell down. So there were several large bicycle clubs, and they started putting pressure on to build better roads for Wisconsin. But the farmers didn't see this too much. You know, they let the horse do the work, and they didn't really realize how much trouble it was. And they said that those bicyclists, they were just sort of a bunch of city dudes, and passed it off. And finally, they realized that it was necessary to get their, when they started actually hauling their crops to market, that they did need better roads. And so in 1911, they finally, with the help of the rural areas, the Constitution was amended so that state aid was used in building roads. Well, in 1871, the first automobile in the United States was built by Dr. Carhart from Racine. But they didn't really show up on the roads till probably about 1908. And the system of driving a car with the wheels spinning and whatnot, they sort of dug themselves in, and they sort of made the roads even worse. And a lot of times they had to go back to the help of the horse to get on through the mud. There were other obstacles to the early travelers, like the tree in the middle of the road. Well, the horse, when he came to this, he had sense enough to go around it, but sometimes the people didn't. They ran into the tree in the middle of the road. Here's an even bigger obstacle. And there were things like sheep in the road and streams to cross with no bridges. They had to ford across the shallow streams. And some places they built bridges, but they were sort of primitive things with hardly any width to them. This one is very narrow and has just a little plank rail to keep you from falling off one side or the other. And if your car was a little bit wider or narrower, you wouldn't be able to get across. The first sort of highway improvement was the horse-drawn drag, or grader. And this was more or less to smooth out the bumps, and they didn't do much in the line of changing the grade at all. It was just a simple thing of smoothing out the bumps, so it wasn't quite so bad, filling up the mud holes. This is sort of a high work operation. It took 2 men to do it, one to drive the horse and one to control the grader blade. As they went on, it got bigger and bigger. They got more men involved. They had more horses and a bigger operation, but it was still horse-powered. About 1920, the Caterpillar tractor was invented, and they found out this was a little bit easier. They were a little bit more reliable than the horses, and they hooked that onto the same old grader. Well, the next step was to simplify it a little bit more and put one operator to do it, and they hooked a tractor engine on the front of this thing and operated it that way. And this is an old tractor, I believe that's an International Harvester, and they used a disc to break up the hardness of the surface so that they could blade it out. And now we're getting to a little bit more like the modern road grader, but it has the engine in the rear and the grader blade in the middle, but it seems to be combined with a dump truck on the back. So it was an all-purpose machine. You could use it for hauling material, or you could use it for grading the road. But then they started realizing that there was some engineering that had to be done in highways, and there was going to have to be some cut and fill involved, and they are going to have to actually move the dirt from one place to another. This is one of the early attempts of this, of the whole train of earth movers. Each one has a man that controls it, and it has a scoop box, and they could scoop it up, and by dragging it along the road and scooped up dirt into it, and also dump it evenly on the other end, very much like the modern earth mover. Another thing that was big in the operation was the steamroller. And this may be the only powered machine on the job sometimes. It was the thing that they ran the gravel plant with, and they also used it to haul the loads out to the job. And they used to say about you, it looked like you were hit by a steamroller. Well, you look at this thing, that's a pretty sinister thing to get hit with. The next thing was the steam shovel. And this is for making large cuts. And this you can see they still had the horse and wagon, but they used the steam shovel to load it. This is for making a big cut through a large hill. In 1917, Wisconsin was the first state to start a numbered highway system. Before that, we had some of the named highways, like the Yellowstone Trail, which actually became Highway 12. And the Lincoln Highway, which is Highway 30, and there was the Dixie Highway, and many different ones that were marked with a simple painted stripe around the post on the corner. Well, sometimes the post on the corner got knocked down, and you went on straight ahead when you were supposed to turn, and you got lost. So the old method of just painting on something that was there wasn't a very good idea. This is Highway 64. You can see when the state highways went into operation, the roads were not very advanced things. Another thing is this bridge on the right that has the number on it. That was the old Widowmaker. Now, of course, anything like this has to have guardrail on it and protection, but people used to run into the end of those, and it was a very sudden stop. The U.S. Highway Commission or Highway Administration adopted the numbered highway system in 1926, based on the Wisconsin system, and the highways do not actually belong to the U.S., but the routes are U.S. designated, so that the highway is still a state highway. This one here was for Missouri for U.S. 66, and a lot of people think that the That's actual, well, there is federal aid in it, but it's no different than any other state highway. It's just that it uses a federal route. Now, Wisconsin also was the first state to use lettered county highways. And Missouri is the only other state that's ever copied this idea. Everyone else uses numbered highways. So you can have Highway 10 as a state highway, Highway 10 as a U.S. highway, or Highway 10 as a county highway. And they might all intersect in the same place. You notice what this one says, though, as you read it. Rather interesting. Now, the improvements on the road started out with the plank road. Now, this was good. It was a nice, smooth road, but it was very hard to stay on this road. And it took a lot of concentration to keep from running off the edge, even though it did have somewhat of a little lip along the edge of it. If you fell off the lip, you can see the ruts where people have done this. And it was actually quite expensive because of the lumber was untreated, and it didn't survive very long. It got broken from heavy. Somebody went out with too heavy a load, and it just didn't stand up too good. But the next thing they tried was gravel, and this worked pretty good. This was a nice thing that you could smooth out the bumps in it and rearrange it a little bit and keep a pretty decent road, but it threw up a lot of dust. And it broke headlights and windshields and this sort of thing. And you got very dusty. The old cars used to wear what they called a duster and goggles so that they wouldn't get damaged from the dust. So the next thing they came up with was with the tar machine. And this is the old thing, you all remember them. They'd run across this with the, spraying tar on the road, and then they'd come along with fellows in a dump truck beside it and throw sand on top of the tar to make a sort of a road mix. So it was actually mixed on the road. But the next step, of course, was to go to the concrete highway. Now, this is the forms for a concrete highway, but they're still using the horse to do the grading to shape the what's going to be the bottom of the pavement. Now, this is an early paving machine. You notice it has this. This is where the paving drum or the mixing drum is here. This is called the skip. They dump into that, and it goes up the chute and tips over and dumps into the paving machine. Then when the concrete is mixed, it comes out and goes into a bucket that runs out on this truss out on the back. And it was just dumped, and it was spread by hand and finally finished off with the screed machine here on the back. This is a little bit later one. This one has the skip is like a big funnel on the back that just raised up, and as it raised up, it dumped the material right into the drum. But it still has the old iron wheels on it. This is probably still in the 1930s. Here's a place where they were bringing in the material from the railroad cars. You see the train parked there on the siding, and they were paving from both directions toward the center. And they're just about to, you can see there's two pavers there, one close and one in the distance. And they're just about to finish this job up. But they brought all the materials, the gravel and the sand and the cement was all brought in by train. And this sort of system went on a little bit later. This is right down on Highway 12 near Augusta, about in the early 1930s when they paved Highway 12. And they built a temporary railroad with the cars and material to come right along the side of the paver. But this is the way the road looked when it was all done. This is Highway 37 down just about a mile west of where Double H connects with 37. That'd be looking kind of eastward. The old Model T Ford chucking along on the brand new highway. One of the things they did with the highways was what they called lip curb, and you could see the edges of the highway are turned up. Well, this was the thing that was done for drainage, and it was to keep the shoulders from washing away. The highway, the water ran off the highway much faster, and so it made washes in the edge of the shoulder. So they put this on to save the water up, and then every once in a while they'd have what they called the surface drain, where that would go off and run down all the way down into the ditch on a concrete flume. Well, this was very nice for drainage, but it was a terrible thing when you hit it with your car, because it would just climb right up that edge just so quick and dump you off on the shoulder very quickly. And usually then there was a little bit of a rut along the edge of that, and you couldn't get back on. and you'd pull the wheel and pull it, and in a sort of a panic that you were going off the road, and then when you'd go off back on the road, you go clear across to the other side. So there were a lot of accidents that were caused by this. And little by little, they took and chopped it all off, all the roads, and they ground it off with grinders and had different ways of getting rid of it. And the only place that there's any of this left that I know of is down on Short Street, just across the Shawtown Bridge. As you go around the curve, there's still the old lip curb on the inside of the curve and 2 surface drains down there. But they're not going to be there very long, because next summer they're going to build a new bridge and a new road there, and so those will be gone. Now we're kind of going to look at a few pictures around Eau Claire. This is an old bridge that was on Highway 12 over Otter Creek. And this is an old 1-lane bridge made out of steel. And this is in the place where now they've got 4 lanes going across. But the thing that's interesting about this, that right down in the bottom of the picture is a car. If you look here, you can see there's the headlights and the radiator and the windshield. There's a car that's went off the edge of the bridge down there. And that's what all the interest is. The people are looking at that car that went off the edge. And luckily, he didn't go all the way into the creek. He's just sort of hanging on the side of the bank. This is when they built the 4-lane. And there you can see when they did that, the old abutment to that bridge was still there. And in fact, I think it's still there underneath the new bridge. They just covered it over, and the old abutment is still in the ground underneath the new eastbound lane of Highway 12. And what did they do with the bridge? They didn't do away with this bridge. It's still around. And here it is. They moved it over to Spooner Avenue, and for many years it was half of the bridge. The other half was this bridge was a concrete arch, a big graceful concrete arch on the north side, and the south side was the old steel bridge from Highway 12. And it's still there in use as the sidewalk, and it carries the waterworks for Altoona across on it. Now this is a picture of the Washington Heights area in about 1937. And this is what's Highway 53 through Hastings Way through Washington Heights. This is Highway 12. This is Highway 53 coming up from the south. This is where that bridge we were just talking about. You can see the road kind of comes off, and there's where the old abutments were. Then it had a bend in it. It came up here, and it came up by McElroy's, which is now called Ole's South Side, and connected that way. Well, then they built Highway 12. They made a new highway, and they came straight through, and they made a nice curve into 53 here. And they had one of the first stoplights was an automatic stoplight right on that corner, that when you rode over a rubber boot, it would trip the light for you. This is London Road, which at that time was Highway 93. So 12 and 53 went together down Hastings Way. When they got to Brackett Avenue, they went down Brackett Avenue into Eau Claire. This is Fairfax Avenue, going north here. There was no Highway 53 going on up across here like it does now. This is Spooner Avenue up here. And the old county shops was on the corner where the East Ridge Mall is. And that, I remember that burning down, and the big fire with all the big explosions of the gas tanks in the trucks when they blow up. And the fire would go way up into the sky. It was in the night, and it was quite a scary thing. My folks lived right here at the end of this little road here. We were one of the early residents in the Altoona addition. Now this is a picture about, this is probably about 1935 or so. This, you could see the curve of Highway 12 coming here. This is 93 coming in here. And this is the building that's now the ATI auto and truck salvage on the corner there. And there's one little house out behind. This is a little bit later. There's the old Bowers Tavern, which is now gone. There's 2 houses out there. And here is Staffney's. You know, Staffney's has all been redone, but if you look, the old curved roof is still in behind those new curved front pieces they put on it, are covering it up a little bit. But if you look behind, you can still see the old curved roof of the Staffney's, which they called Sunset Inn. This is looking south. This is McElroy's, which is now Ole's. This was the old WTAQ, was the first radio station in Eau Claire. You can see their towers here. And there was nothing at all out in here but farmland, and out here was Robbins Farm, which Robbins School is named after. And this is the Gillette Farm. It was actually, I think originally it was the Barland Farm, but at this time it was called the Gillette Farm. It was a very nice farm with two big silos that were made out of stone. This is a little bit newer. This is in the mid-40s. You can see things are building up a little bit more here. They've built Claremont Avenue through as Highway 12 to bypass. This was done in 1941. And this is London Road coming up here. But they took and diverted Highway 93 over into this big five-way intersection here. A big expanse of concrete out there that you could get lost in the middle of. This is the White House was there at that time, the White House restaurant, and this was the Windmill Drive-In. This originally was over in this location, and then they moved it over here, and it sat there through the 50s. And later in the 60s, it was moved over east of the bowling alley. This is a picture from the ground of that big five-way intersection. You see a lot of concrete out there. This is Staffney's with the round roof here. And I believe this house is still there in the front of the Antler Motel. This is in the 50s. Things are booming here. Here we have 53 is built through to the north. That was done in 1940. This is the bowling alley. This is Brackett Avenue. This is Claremont still going across here as Highway 12. And they have the old original TV tower, the cantilever one that didn't have any guy wires on it, that was just raised from the paper at the bottom of it. In 1965, they decided to build the new Highway 53 as a 4-lane. And this is just when they were beginning to get ready to do this. You can see the beginnings of the piers here for the overhead that went over Claremont Avenue. And this is a picture of they had already built the northwest ramp, and they could continue to road on around to divert the traffic while they built the interchange here. But they're still, at this time, they're still using part of the traffic going right up Old Highway 53. You can see they've already cut off London Road here and brought it around this way. And they're in the act of cutting off 93 here. This is the old Volkswagen dealership. This is another view, and there you're looking out toward the country, and you can see the beginnings of the Highway 93 interchange. And this is where the London Mall is now, and there's nothing there yet. And this is when it's all finished off in 1967, I believe this was. And the 93 interchange is done, and the highway running out, and the interstate was completed. And the London Mall is there. And they have the new TV tower, the new 1,000-foot tower with the guy wires. And if we went up the highway a little ways, there's just a little bit of point of interest. This is the first McDonald's. There's two more that have been built since then on the same site. This is the old original Golden Arches. But not many of you probably remember that there was a restaurant there before that. It was called the Golden Ribbon Drive-In. This particular picture was taken at the time of the Colfax tornado, and we had a lot of really wild weather that year, and that's what we took the picture for, was for the weather, but never thinking that this would be something that would be of interest in the future. This is going on down Old Highway 12. They went down Brackett Avenue and down what they call Plank Hill or Harding Avenue Hill. This is the corner of Margaret Street and Harding Avenue. This is a little bit of Valmont. All there was is the one block was sort of a little cut across there. This is the area at the top of the hill where all those nice houses are in that little dead-end street. At this time, this was a junkyard. And all of this woods was full of old cars, and there was a nice fence that went along here that was made out of car frames. And it came right out to the road, and until just about 3 years ago, one of those old car frames from that fence was still sticking up beside the road. But they recently did some buried telephone or something in there, and they dug it out, so it's not there anymore. This you can see where the east side hill came over to about Hoover Avenue, and the rest of that was all open. Just off to the right was a big open field, and that was the circus grounds. Now, Highway 12 and 53 went right down Barstow Street, and when they got to Madison Street, they split, and 53 went east up the hill and over the railroad tracks. Here you see the sign still says Highway 53 with the arrow on it. Came up over at grade over the railroad tracks. They had crossing bars that were controlled by a man that sat up in a little house there that raised and lowered the bars so that traffic couldn't go across when a train came. But this hill coming up there was quite steep. And this caused a lot of problems of people having to stop on the grade and slip their clutch and let go of the handbrake and step on the gas and not kill the engine and get going on a 10% grade to get started again after they'd stopped for the train. And of course, every once in a while they'd roll backwards into somebody else and have a little accident there. Well, to eliminate that problem, they finally built this underpass, and this is the way it is today. But can you imagine going from that street down below all the way up over the top of that bridge in one pitch? It was a pretty steep road. And when it was icy, it was just about impossible. Now this is another aerial view of the east side. This is the east side hill. This is Spooner Avenue again. This is Enterprise Street. This is where Hardee's is right in here now. Highway 53 comes from here right across here now. This is Hodgeboom Avenue. This is an interesting thing, this old curve. This is where the streetcar used to go out around the curve. Instead of going around the kinks like the bus did, you went around the curve, and they eliminated part of that road. Now it's now just a dead end in there. But there's no bridge here now. The old country club is right on the center line of the highway, and they had to move that further over to the right. This is the Drummond Packing Company. This is where 53, after it went through downtown, it came up here out Birch Street and around a nice curve and went north just after it crossed the overhead over the through line and the Milwaukee Road Railroad. Well, here's a picture in 1940 when they were building the Hastings Way Bridge, the first one. This is the old Drummond Packing Company, had its own water tower. And here you can see the arches of the piers of the bridge. And that is the bridge that's the southbound bridge yet today. This is up, this was the, at that time was the Linderman Box Factory. It's now, I believe, Johnson Printing. Here you can see the old railroad tracks. Both of these have been pulled up. One of these has been made into a bike trail. I believe it's this one. This is the overhead of Birch Street over the railroad. This was an old bulk plant, and this now has become the Labor Temple. But there was nothing out here. This is just a big field out beyond the highway. And that's where the grocery store is out there, and the big shopping center is all out in this area. And here's that curve. This is taken right from the center of the old railroad overhead, and there you can see how what a sharp curve it was. You went around from Birch Street onto the road going north that goes up along by the old Coca-Cola plant. Just after the war, they converted this area to the veterans' housing, and there was all sorts of little well, they might call them shanties that they brought from the army bases. They were little barracks buildings that they had on army bases, and they filled this whole field up with little tiny houses for the returning servicemen to live in, because there was all of a sudden this sudden boom of the baby boomers, where they got their start. And there were all these servicemen that came home and got married and were starting families, and there just wasn't enough housing for them. But now we're going to go the other way on Madison Street on Highway 12. And this kind of goes back before the days of the Highway Commission. It goes back to about 1880, I believe. And or 1899, I take it back. Because 1899, there was a wooden bridge across on Madison Street over the Chippewa River. In 1899, it burnt down. The east or the west three spans of it. This is the remains of that original bridge. But there's one span left standing over on the east side. Well, they built 3 new spans out of steel on the west side. And this is one of those. And this is the way it looked in 1922 when they started to decide that they probably needed a new bridge in this area. And one of the main reasons was that old span on the east. This is the old wooden span that was left there from the 1890s. And you can see it's looking kind of sad, and they had to put props underneath it to hold it up. And this is a view looking at the end of the bridge. You can see the laminations. You can see this is the wood planks all laminated together to make the beams. And it was quite narrow and rickety. And there was time to replace it. Sign up here says, I think it's $25 fine for traveling faster than a walk with a horse. The trotting of the horse would get the whole bridge shaking, and it could actually bring a bridge down from the vibration of a trotting horse. So they were not supposed to go faster than a walk with a horse on the bridge. Well, this is the destruction of that bridge in 1922. And this is looking at the East Abutment. And this old substation was there until just a couple of years ago. They tore that down. This is the old Phoenix Manufacturing Company. This is where they built the Phoenix log hauler that you've seen the pictures of. The old, looked like a locomotive with Caterpillar tracks on it and sled runners on the front. Those are built right here in Eau Claire at the Phoenix Manufacturing. Here they built a trestle out to supply all the workers on the bridge for all sorts of things. Here they're hauling gravel out. I'm sure they had a mixer out here someplace they were hauling the gravel to. And this is the beginning of the new piers, and this is the remains of the old caisson type piers of the old bridge. This is taken from that trestle. There you can see they're forming up the arches. They're all formed with timber forms, and then the arches were poured out of concrete. The building in the background with the big smokestack is the Lang Canning Company. This was a big set of orange buildings. There were many different storage buildings and different areas to that. It was quite a big area. It covered the area where the video store is on Oxford Avenue today. There you can see how they went to form the arches. You can there see another view of the Lang Canning Company in the background. And here's the way the concrete was handled. They had these little buggies. They were sort of like a wheelbarrow, except they had big wheels, so they're easier to push. And they had the buggy, the bucket of concrete in the center of it. And they wheeled them out on those little narrow planks and dumped it into the forms, bucket by bucket. And here are the finished arches. And then, of course, on this they put vertical uprights, and then the deck of the bridge was over the top. You can see the old Sacred Heart School was a big school, and the old church that had the pointed spires on it. And this, of course, is the substation and the Phoenix Manufacturing. And this is the picture of the finished bridge. It was a very, very beautiful arched bridge with big round globe lights on the top of it. And they had a big street dance the day that they opened it up. It was quite a big deal for the city of Eau Claire. This is another picture of the Madison Street Bridge after it was finished. You can see the nice globes on the top of the pillars here. And it also had some nice designs on the below the pillars that were in the concrete. And 50 years later, in the 1970s, they had to tear it down. And this is the destruction of the arches again. But you see the old substation is still here, but there's a new Sacred Heart Church with the round domes up on top of the hill there. And this is the new bridge that's there today. It was built in the 1970s. And they had a little street dance for this one. They opened this one too. This was opening day. You see the police cars still blocking off the roadway, getting ready for the official presentation in the middle of the bridge. This is another picture in Eau Claire. This is the beginnings of the Claremont Avenue Bridge over the Chippewa River. This is in 1941 during the 1941 flood. This is the old Milwaukee Road Railroad Bridge. You can see how high the water is right up to the bottom of the steel almost. And this is the fill that coming out from Menominee Street to the beginning of the bridge. This is from Menominee Street looking south. This was the construction of the structure that used to be Sherman Creek, which used to go under Highway 12 in two places. And now, of course, it's been discontinued and moved off to the side. But this is looking up the fill toward the south. And you see there's nothing much up on top of that hill. It was sort of a big desert up there with sand dunes. And this, of course, is during the flood, and their crane is underwater. A little bit of a loss in time for that. This is looking the other way from Menominee Street up toward the hill to the north. This is the old railroad track that used to go into the box factory. And this is the beginning of the cut up the hill by South Michigan Street. This is building the northerly bridge of Sherman Creek, where it went under Highway 12. And this bridge has just been recently torn out the last time they rebuilt it. The old grain elevator is just off the picture to the right. And this is the highway going up the hill, and this would be Michigan Avenue crossing this way. This was taken just recently in 1993 at another flood. And this is looking at the 4 lanes now of Highway 12. Another bridge has been added alongside of it. And the fill has been widened out. And Sherman Creek has now been diverted. Instead of going across the highway and over by Half Moon Lake and then back again below Menominee Street, they took and diverted it through this big channel that runs right along the front of Mike's Smokehouse, or what used to be Mike's Smokehouse, and comes out on the other side of Menominee Street. This is right near the gas station. And here you can see the water, of course. This is at flood time, and the water is filled up clear up over the openings of the channel. This is in 1965, I believe. This was beginning for the redoing of Claremont Avenue. Now here we had the single bridge over the Chippewa River. You can see this is the old Milwaukee Road Railroad Bridge. The old red building is the old sauerkraut factory, which is now gone. And there isn't much else out there, but this is the old Karen's junkyard there. And this is from the end of that bridge looking southeast, and there isn't much there, but still some of that desert left there. We have the Holiday Inn up on top of the hill there. And this is the corner of Craig Road, the 2-lane highway yet. The Sacred Heart Hospital was there, and the Big Steer was there already too. And this is the Holiday Inn, but the big round tower wasn't there. This, of course, is now the Ramada Inn. But this is the intersection of Craig Road, where you have lights and turn bays and all that sort of stuff. This is Highway 37 coming up to Claremont Avenue, and there was nothing going ahead. There was no Hardee's. And all of the big buildings, medical building is all not there yet. And what is there is the old Hendrickson Hill ski jump was still there. And that's how that's called Hendrickson Drive, is because that was the Hendrickson Hill was named for Jimmy Hendrickson, who lost his life ski jumping. This is the corner of Stein Boulevard, still the 2-lane highway for Claremont. And all of this area, this parking area in front of the building, has now been covered over by enlargement of the building. This is going over State Street, still had big trees along the road to run into. And the old liquor store over here on the edge is still in there, but the fire station wasn't there yet. Just a little bit further over in Putnam Heights, the church was there, but there was, at that time, there was a crossing where you could go right across on that street. And this is by Memorial High School. At grade crossing with walk lights, which was kind of a dangerous thing because even at that time there was already getting to be quite a bit of traffic across there. But when they put in the 6-lane street, then they added this underpass, which was much safer. This is Highway 53 going north. This used to be State Highway 11, but when they renumbered the highways, this became Highway 53, and this was the old 18-foot pavement. They later added another lane to this. It had a 3-lane pavement, and the middle one was supposed to be for you to pass. Well, that became a very dangerous thing because every once in a while somebody would pull out to pass from opposite directions at the same time and meet head-on in the middle of the road. So that's been eliminated, and they put the center line back down the middle of that middle lane. But if you drive up in that area that's County Trunk J, is about where this is by Lake Hallie, you'll still see that it's actually made up out of 3 lanes instead of 2. This is going on up to Chippewa County. This is sort of an interesting thing. This goes back to 1916. This was before Lake Wissota was flooded. And this is the area of the Paint Creek Bridge on County Trunk X, which was used to be State Trunk Highway 29. And the area called the Wissota View would be right up about here. Now, the old roadway used to go down across the creek, and you can see here is an old truss bridge on abutments real down real low. The railroad went over the top, and there's an old temporary trestle put in here. This tower is what they elevated concrete up in this tower and then dumped it down the chute to deliver concrete to any place on the job. Here's another picture of the same area. Here these are old slushers. These were pulled by a horse. You can see where the horse tracks, and they dragged this up and dumped it. They were dragging, it's like a big scoop shovel, and it had a man on the back of the 2 handles, and they'd fill it up, and then they'd flip it over. This was the original earth-moving machine. Here we can see our old truss bridge is still down here, but they're building these big high piers here on each side. Just a little bit further along, they've completed the 4 big piers and these tremendous big abutments. And they are going to carry both the railroad and the highway. So these 2 abutments are, these 2 are the highway, and the ones behind it are the railroad. And using a common abutment for the 2 bridges. And the thing that's really interesting about this picture is this is all Lake Wissota out behind here now. And this hill is where the island is. This is the, about this much of it sticking out is the island that's in Lake Wissota. But here you can see the whole thing. And right here, this little peak right there is the peak of a roof of a house. There was a house between the highway and the island that's now all flooded. And you can see our concrete pouring tower and this goofy thing going here pouring the concrete in these tremendous big abutments. Now this is taken down from down below and gives you an idea how deep the water is under that bridge. It's about 40 feet. And this is after they've raised the old bridge up on top of the new pillars. That's another thing this other picture shows. You can see here's the truss of the bridge, and they're putting blocking under it, and they put some under each end and keep raising it up until they raise that bridge up and set it on top of these pillars. They used the same bridge truss that was down below and moved it up to the top of the pillars. And there you can see the highway bridge and the railroad bridge, and that's the old temporary trestle in the background where the railroad ran. And this is what it looked like when they filled it up. And this is what it looks like today. This is from the boat landing just south of the County Trunk X. And this is sort of an aerial view of it. This is the bridge we're talking about. Here's the island, and this is what they call the small Lake Wissota. And Chippewa Falls is off to the left. This is a job over on the Holton Hill. This is Highway 64 coming out of Stillwater on the east side. And you can see this was a big project with the steam shovels, and by this time, this is about 1930, you can see the old 1930 version dump trucks they were using in place of wagons by this time, but they're still using the steam shovel. You can see it's got the smoke coming out of it. And they haul the dirt from up in the cut down to this big fill that's coming out to the new bridge. And you can see that this is taken from the old bridge, and you can see the old road going along here and up, winding up the hill with the white guardrail on it. Well, they kept hauling more and more of this filling out and dumping it and dumping, and there you can see the old bridge. This is from on the fill looking at the old bridge. Well, this fill just kept sloughing out there a little bit, and when it would get in the water, it kept spreading. And it started putting pressure on the old bridge. And here you see it starting to all buckle up. And eventually it finally fell down, and they couldn't drive across it anymore. Before the new bridge was done, they'd hoped to have keep this bridge in place until the new one was operable. It didn't work. This is the old Hudson Bridge. This is just north of the what's now I-94, and it comes right out of downtown Hudson. This was a toll bridge, and it had a real steep grade up to the bridge, and then the bridge was level, and then it had another steep grade going up, so you had these two humps to kind of go over as you went over the bridge. It was 18 feet wide with a plank deck. And there you can see where it went down and on flat across the bridge, and then this big over the hump and down the steep grade down the hill. And at the bottom of that was the old causeway and the toll house. Now the causeway is still there, but the toll house is gone. But you used to have to stop and pay your toll here. One fellow stopped to pay his toll, and a truck came down here and lost his brakes and ran over him and just flattened his car, and he was killed. And this is the way it looks now pretty much. There's the old foundations of the beginning of the bridge, and there's still two of the old pillars from the old bridge are still there. I was there last week, and they're still there. So you can look off to your right as you go across the new interstate bridge, and you can see those pillars standing up along the river there. This is the beginning of the, at that time was Highway 12, relocated for the bridges where they are now. This is the first interchange on the east side of the river, where Highway 35 connected in. This is on the very peak of the old steel bridge. And you can look over, you can see the old bridge in the background, and that's about how far, if you look, you can see that old causeway, you can see the old pillar sticking up in the woods. You go across there. This is a friend of mine, is Sam Retallick, who is, people from the museum probably know him. He's over there quite often. He was inspecting the rivets on the very peak of the bridge. This is the way they used to put in rivets. They had a forge right on the site, and they'd heat the rivets up red hot, and they'd throw them through the air. The fellow, the blacksmith here, would throw the rivet, and you see the other fellow, he's got a funnel. And he would catch the rivet in that funnel. And he had to walk the beams. He's walking that narrow beam and catching a rivet. So they had to do this pretty good. They had to have them red hot, so when they put them into the things, they could hammer them down when they could beat it over with a riveting gun. And this is the bridge that they were building, the one on the left. And that one now has been just torn down in the last few years. And a new bridge has been built in between these. So they have two low steel bridges on I-94. But this was the old original Highway 12 bridge. It was built in 1950. And the other one was built in the 70s, and the third one was built in the 90s. And this is a little bit of Hudson when they first opened I-94. They went down to a single lane across, or two lanes across the bridge from the four, and had these rather unique interchange connections at the top of the hill. And since then, all of these ramps have been taken out except this one. This one is still left in place. And they wanted to keep this one, but they decided it was too dangerous and too close to the last one. Of course, this is all the area is all grown up with shops and used car lots, and the Hudson House that's right in here somewhere, and just built up tremendously. This is on the Knapp Hill. This was at a tour while they were building it. They brought a bus tour out of engineers and news people to show them where the interstate was going to go. And as you can see, it's in kind of rough condition. I think the bus was stuck about right there. They couldn't get up any further up the hill. And this is a view of the Knapp Hill when it was finished. This was the area right about in here is where the bus was stuck. This is from looking toward the east from that little town road that goes over the top just as you get to the top of the hill. That was what I worked on when I first came to the Highway Commission in 1958. I worked doing cross sections up the side of this hill. That was my first job in the field. This was the temporary end of I-94 out at the corner of what's now 124 comes off, double E and 124. And this was a temporary connection from about 1958 to 1968, I believe, or 65, somewhere in there. This is the old place that used to be called Franz, was there already. And they used to call this on Highway 12, they used to call this the Coach Club intersection. There was an old restaurant that was made out of a railroad coach. And then, of course, after that, it was Grandma's, and Grandma's was right about in here. It hasn't been built yet at this one, this picture was taken. But this is the place that was called Franz, and now it's I believe it's a pizza place. But this is where Burger King is right down here, and McDonald's. These are just a couple of shots that are kind of interesting scenery. This is probably along Highway 35, looks like the Mississippi River. But somewhere in the 30s by the type of hat that the girl is wearing and the style of the car. Another picture showing the type of guardrail they used to have, the wooden guardrail. Then we're going to center line methods. Well, at first, the concrete highway, what they used for a center line was just a tar strip down the middle. And here you see the fellow is marking the tar strip, and he has to be careful when he walks so you don't step in the fresh tar, because then there'll be footprints all along. So you had to straddle that stripe as he made it. And I believe the truck is there just to protect him so he doesn't get run over. Well, then the next step was to go to the truck-mounted striping machine. This one had the tar wagon right on it, and you know, that lasted a little bit longer. And you see the fellow here with the steering wheel, and he could control this in and out so that he kept it going right down the center. And this is some of the first experiments with putting the white line on the blacktop road. And you see he has two ropes there. And one was to start and stop. That's what they started. They figured they could, it was too expensive to paint this all the way. Tar was pretty cheap, but paint was expensive. So they came out with the idea of the dashed line down the center, that they could save a lot by only putting a dash every so far. Well, he's got one rope to start it and one rope to stop it. And this little trailer is going along the bottom with the paint sprayer on it. Now we have some floods here, some different disasters. We're starting with the floods. This is out on Highway 29 near Owen. The bridge is washed out in a flood. This is another one in 1941, same time as the Chippewa River was flooding. The Jump River was flooding up in Taylor County. And you see the road is completely blocked off here. And this is Highway 73 going across the Jump River. And the bridge is completely underwater. And you can see it's sort of lost its pinnings and in big trouble. This is after the water receded a little bit. But somehow they salvaged this thing and they put it back up again, and it's still in place today, the same bridge. Here's another part of the flood. This truck is off the edge of the road, and they've got him tied up to the post here so he don't float away. And they're trying to salvage the load out of it before the whole thing washes away in the flood. Which looks to me like that would be quite a dangerous job, being in that thing trying to load the material out of it. This is another washout. This is on Highway 72 over near Cave Creek. The bridge is washed completely off the pier, which is on the left there. It slid right off. But they salvaged that one too. They jacked that one up and put it back on, built a new pier underneath it, and a new abutment, and that was still in position well into the 50s. This one here, they're speculating if there was somebody in this car or not. This was a car that washed down in the flood, and they found it upside down and buried only the back wheels sticking out of the ground. And I could not find out if there was anybody in it, or it just had been a parked car, or the people had got out of it and it floated down without them. I don't think there was anybody in the car. Now we're getting into the winter driving conditions. This fellow tried to pass the snowplow or something, and he drove up on the edge of the bank and tipped over. This was probably in 1940 when they had the Armistice Day blizzard. You can see the number of trucks were stalled right in the road and buried. It was pretty serious snow conditions. And they had the old Oshkosh snowplow. This thing was about 12 feet high, I believe, and I think that the top of the blade was probably at least 6 feet tall in the middle, and you can see the snow is going over the top of the blade onto the hood of the truck. Here they're coming through. There's an old 35 Ford caught in the snowbank there. They're trying to break through to him. These cars stalled in the road caused quite a bit of problem. Here's one that they didn't see, and they just plowed it off on the side. Didn't discover it until they'd went by. And this is what it looked like when they got the road open. It's like driving through the Grand Canyon. And this is the ultimate snow removal machine. When all else fails, you do that. But if need be, you can always go back to the shovel. Then they had their share of blow-ups in the road. We have the little ones that are a foot wide or so on Claremont Avenue in the hot weather, but in the old days they used to hump up like this. That was quite a serious thing if you hit that at speed. And also they had the problem with frost heaving. This is down on Highway 12 near Augusta, where the actual block of pavement tipped over and sank in the muck. And the truck came along and hit it and tore the front wheels off the truck and buried the back end into the sinkhole. You can see how the concrete is all tipped up where the fellow is standing behind it there. So a complete breakdown of the subsurface of the road. And of course there have been times when they buried the earth removing machines too. But this is the ultimate getting buried. I don't know exactly where this was, but this one was in the file there, and I had to save this. This was too good to miss. And this is what happens when you try to take a steam shovel across the bridge that isn't strong enough. The whole bridge collapsed. Luckily, the fellow in the truck just got across, and it didn't pull him back down onto it. But the bridge was completely ruined. And I don't know how they ever got that out of there. Another thing that we used to have along our highways were the signboards. These were finally cleaned up in Johnson's administration. That they had the big program of highway beautification, and all the signboards were taken down. But it used to be that the highways are lined for miles and miles with these signboards. And this just a thing of interest is all highways are built with a plan. You might think that they just go out with a road grader and start building a road, but that isn't the way it is. Even the more minor ones, this happens to be just a county highway. There is a plan like this for every part of the road. So this shows the original road here with the dotted line. This is where it went. And now they're going to relocate that road going out straight across the creek here and up the hill. Well, here's a box culvert they're going to build in this place. This line represents the center line and has numbered stations along it every 100 feet. They call it a station. The two lines on either side is the right-of-way that they're going to buy for this new road. And here where they go up the hill, they have to buy more right-of-way. They've already figured out how much width they need so that they know how much right-of-way they have to buy. This information here describes the curvature of this, what kind of a curve this is, how long it is, and what the degree of curvature is. Down here is the profile, and this is every inch on it this way is 100 feet, but every inch this way is 10 feet, so it's greatly exaggerated. You see everything is very much up and down. Then you can actually get an idea what the grade of the road is. This dotted line represents what the ground looked like before they start building. This line is the line that's used to, is going to be the finished grade with the nice vertical curves in it so that you don't have the big ka-chunks, so that this rides real nice like a roller coaster rather than going over steps. And this information here tells you the amount of dirt that's necessary, because you have to take the dirt from the cut and make it balance for the fill. And so you can adjust this road up and down so that this dirt that you're taking out of the cut will make the fill down here. And that's what these symbols represent. These are places where the dirt actually balances out. So you haul the dirt from here down as far as here, and you haul the dirt from here down as far as there. And this is the box culvert that they're building. This is the same as this, but this is the profile of it down there. But all plans, all highways are built that way, and some of them are much more complex when you get into the 4-lane highways. And of course they do cross sections across this way, which is they use in figuring out how much dirt it is. Every 100 feet is a cross section this way too. And that's what's actually used to compute the dirt with. Well, that's just a little bit about highways in the last 60 years. We went from this in 1900 to this in 1960, or the modern interchange. This happens to be the one down by Madison on Highway 12 and 18 and I-94 and 90. But no, this is 12 and 18. 94 and 90 is the next one up. But sometimes in our modern age, it starts to get looking like this. This happens to be on Carmichael Road in Hudson, and there aren't really that many well, there are that many lights, but this is taken about a half mile away with a huge telephoto lens, so that it stacks all the lights all the way down the street all together. So it doesn't really look quite that bad when you're out there. And I thank you very much. This is the end of my program for today, and we'll maybe see you again. Thank you.